Everyone in Washington is trying to kill you all the time. And it's kill or be killed. Are you ready to kill a man, Pete? Are you ready to choke a man over a vote?
I don't think so.
Because this is prison rules now, baby.
That is Saturday Night Live's take on the staff changes at the White House, and that may be the last time we see a Pete Rouse character on SNL.
I know Pete Rouse, and that is not Pete Rouse. But Top Line begins right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC's Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
And I'm Jonathan Karl.
Every day at noon Eastern, we're right here bringing you the latest in politics, everything you need to know. Twitter.com/Rick Klein, Twitter.com/John Karl for even more. And John, get back here soon because I have a mug with your name on it, literally.
Dude, this is outrageous. We will talk about that after the show. But we're going to start off with BAM. The President of the United States is out with his first general election ad of the season. And this is interesting on two counts here, Rick. For one, this is an ad that is targeting James Gow, the guy, the only Republican in the House of Representatives who voted, Joseph Gow, the only Republican who voted for the health care bill. If you remember, Congressman Gow voted for the health care bill the first time around, ended up voting against it for the final round, but he was the sole Republican yes. And what does he get in return? An ad targeting him by the President of the United States. The other interesting thing, Rick, is just that this is the first one. And it's the first one, and it's in one of the most Democratic districts in the entire country down there in New Orleans.
It's so interesting that we'll show you a part of it. Take a look.
The city of New Orleans has had its trials. But you've also had great champions, fighting to see you through the tough times. Cedric Richmond is one of those champions.
Yes, poor Congressman Gow. He gets attacked right out of the box. Next up today, juiced. Sharon Angle is caught on tape. John Ralston out in Nevada captures a precious and unbelievable series of exchanges where Sharon Angle brags about the juice that she's got in Republican circles and then blasts away at Republicans. Take a listen to this.
Republicans have lost their standard, they've lost their principle, and really that's what the machinery in the Republican Party is fighting against these. They have never really gone along with Texas and its government.
Ah, that machine all over again. We hear about them.
Yeah, and the context here is important. This was a meeting that Angle was having with a third-party candidate running as a Tea Partier. She was trying to encourage him to get out of the race, so clearly he was telling him some of what he wanted to hear. But I don't think many people would doubt that Angle was saying what she believed there. And in fact, her campaign spokesman told me late last night that she was simply talking bluntly and sharing the frustrations that a lot of Nevadans have. So there you go. Welcome to Washington, should she win. It will be interesting. Next up, tightening. Republican leaders, House leaders, are now downplaying expectations for taking over the House. We've heard in recent days both from Boehner's camp and from Eric Cantor saying that this race is beginning to tighten. They still believe they can pull it off, get the 40 seats they win, but they want to downplay expectations. They've gotten a little bit out of control for some Republicans. If you go, Rick, as we've been saying, race by race, it is difficult to see, not impossible, but difficult to see how the Republicans get over 40.
Well, let me tell you this. In terms of downplaying expectations, 4 words. Good luck with that. There is no way that they can control this right now. If Republicans do not take over the House of Representatives, it will be viewed as something of a missed opportunity, maybe even a disaster in Republican politics. We have a lot of soul searching in the party, and you really can't dial back those expectations that late. And finally today, like it is. That's Rahm Emanuel's slogan as he starts barnstorming in Chicago, campaigning out there. But he is immediately met by a questioning story in the Chicago Sun-Times that says he may not be a resident of Chicago who is capable of running. So welcome to some hardball politics. Someone dropped a dime on you there, Rahm.
Yeah, and if you look at that picture right there, you would have seen Valerie Jarrett in the frame just a moment ago. Of course, fellow Chicagoan, fellow White House senior staffer. Very interesting this morning, Rick. Valerie Jarrett declined to endorse Rahm Emanuel for Chicago mayor. She was asked repeatedly this morning on MSNBC and said that she was staying out of it. So it's one vote he may not have yet.
Oh, that's going to be fun in Chicago. A lot of folks waited a long time for that job.
Now, we've got something for you, a unique thing here right now, an exclusive interview with Joe Miller, who, of course, had his first national interview right here on Top Line. We did it again. This time it was for a special webcast that I did with Politico's Mike Allen called The Scoop. We sat down with Joe Miller at We the Pizza right here on Capitol Hill.
Now you've been fun to cover, fun to write about. You win, you come to D.C. Are you going to get boring?
There's no way that I'm going to get bored. I mean, this is going to be a lot of hard.
Boring. Are you going to be a boring? You know, we have seen a lot of candidates very colorful on the campaign trail. They get to Washington and suddenly,
put on the suit.
You know.
Well,
no
do you find me boring now?
No, not
okay,
yet. But
well,
you're still a candidate. So.
But Joe's not going to change. Trust me, I'm not going to be boring.
Now, are you worried about fitting in with the Senate Republicans and your leadership, your new bosses?
Fitting in is not my concern. My concern is the country, making sure that we bring the leadership necessary to turn this nation around. And I think that it really is the people of America that are doing that. I mean, you look at what Alaskan voters have done with this race. I mean, they're communicating something through who they've chosen through the primary, through who they'll choose.
It sounds like you'd be willing to buck Senate Republican leaders.
We're going to do what's necessary in order to make sure that America gets back on the right path. I mean, we aren't going to play ball. We're going to make sure things get done.
So who should the Republican leader be?
Whoever the caucus determines the leader should be.
And you must have feelings about this. Do you think we need a change in the leadership?
I think we need to make sure that this Congress, whether Republican or Democrat, takes the right path, and that means restraining the federal government back to a manageable level, one that I think is mandated by the Constitution.
You are very confident that you're going to win this race, and your Twitter feed has had some things just in the last day or so. I think we'll do some house hunting while I'm in D.C. Guess I should pick out some office furniture as well while in D.C. And then there's the matter of the plaque for the door. Is this getting a little bit too confident, a little bit measuring the drapes?
The Twitter you missed was the feed that said, I'm looking for a new staffer to do Twitter feeds.
No, wait a minute. You're not telling me that you don't do the Joe W. Miller Twitter
That's a
tweets.
Volunteer staffer. It's a volunteer staffer. Didn't do any house hunting. Certainly we aren't overconfident. We're working this race as if it's just as hard in the primary. We don't have an overconfident spirit in this. In fact, when we get back to Alaska, we're doing town hall meeting after town hall meeting to make sure that Alaskans get the message that we've got to do something about our future. We've got to get back in control of our resource base, and we've got to get the federal government off our back.
Any chance we can get you to do your own tweets?
I have done some, and I'll admit the ones I do.
Okay, all right.
I've got the Twitter app on my iPhone. It's just I'm not very, my fingers are too big.
Yeah. Now, just to get into some of the substance of your views, you are a constitutionalist.
Right.
That's the core of your political philosophy here. And we did an interview some time back where you said that unemployment benefits are not constitutional, or may not be constitutionally authorized.
I think I saw that several dozen times after that interview too.
Yeah, probably. So, but can you help me understand?
And you
that?
still stick by it.
Well, look, this is an issue not whether or not Joe's against unemployment compensation. I'm very much for it. But the issue is who administers that program? Who should be in charge of that program? It's a question of state control or federal control. Who has the power? Who has the control? Who has the money? And our perspective is those programs, really, they're already administered largely at the state level. And we think that ought to stay there. But we also think that the funding, the other mechanisms are best in state hands. Who's better to determine what the people need than those leaders that are closest to the people?
What do you think the Fed should do? Pentagon, clearly. What else?
Well, I think that we need to be focused on those things that the government at the central level does best. And those things that our founders are really interested in, national defense, obviously. We're right now spread thin. We're all across the world, Iraq,
we've agreed
Afghanistan.
about defense. Like what else? Post office?
Oh, I like post offices, sure. What I'd recommend that you do is you go to the Constitution and you look at the enumerated powers, because what we have is something that we call the 10th Amendment that says, look, if it's not there, if it's not enumerated, then it's delegated to the states. Everything that's not there is reserved to the states and the people. And I think that's a key factor in looking at what we want to do with the federal government. The federal government, in what it's done, it's broken, created inefficiencies, it's expanded the power of government to the extent that we're now a nation that is effectively bankrupt. We're now a nation that is getting involved in ways that it shouldn't be.
Be practical. How do you roll that back? How do you get back to your enumerated powers?
Well, I got to tell you, in the next 2 years, it's going to be difficult because President Obama clearly likes to expand the role of federal government. That's something that I think Alaskans are crying out against, the American people are crying out against. So what we do in the next 2 years is we do a lot of defunding. We look at these regulations, we look at these agencies that have overreached and said, look,
Defund the EPA?
Defund certain components of it, absolutely. Not
What
the
else?
entire. There's a proper rule for some of these agencies where you've got interstate impacts.
Okay, so-
there's no question about it. But when they're messing in areas that is purely interstate, in other words, only impacts the state itself, the federal government has no business. Shouldn't be there. Shouldn't be creating inefficiency. Shouldn't be creating increased debt that is now burdening my kids, my grandkids, great grandkids. Who knows how many generations.
What about unemployment? I mean, I'm sorry, minimum wage. Should the federal government be setting a minimum wage? I mean, every state's different. There are different standards, different costs of living in every state. Should there be a federal?
It's not enumerated power.
Should the federal government be requiring a minimum wage?
That is clearly up to the states. We believe, in fact, the state of Alaska has a minimum wage which is higher than the federal level because our state leaders have made that determination. At the minimum level, again, that should be the state's decision.
So there should not be a federal minimum
There
wage?
should not be. That is not within the scope of the powers that are given to the federal government. And again, let me make it clear, this is not just a simple checklist. This is, let's think of this pragmatically as well. Even if you disagree with the constitutional approach, which I think is the number one thing that we ought to be following, it still makes far more sense to have those kind of decisions made at the level closest to the people, where there's more accountability, less inefficiency, where there's a more understanding of where the people ought to be and what the state role of government is. We've said this many times. If you like big government, move to Massachusetts. I mean, I'm not trying to attack Scott Brown or anybody there, but
Massachusetts
I mean,
is going Republican.
they like health care at the state level, and I mean those are the choices that can be made at the state level.
The full interview will air later on abcnews.com later today. But Rick, you'll be interested to know two things. First, we ask him if he intends to move to Washington, D.C. If he wins. And we also ask him whether or not he would support Sarah Palin. I think you will find especially his answer to that last question quite interesting.
And he addresses the beard question, right? It's hard to get elected to the Senate with a beard.
That's the big question, because as you know, we have absolutely nobody in the United States Senate with a beard right now. In fact, the only senator with any facial hair at all is our friend Roland Burris from Illinois. So this would be
All right,
groundbreaking.
Sure.